Number one rule of Wall Street. Nobody, I don't care if you're Warren Buffett or if you're Jimmy Buffett, nobody knows if the stock is going to go up, down, sideways, or in fucking circles. Least of all stockbrokers. Right? It's all a fugazi. You know what a fugazi is?
Fugazi. It's fake.
Yeah, fugazi. It's a wazi, it's a woozy, it's a fairy dust. It doesn't exist. It's never landed. It is no matter. It's not on the elemental chart. It's not fucking real.
Hi, my name is Ines Pillay, and I'm a certified financial planner. And my presentation today, I'm going to take you through the major asset classes. 4 major asset classes with some subvariants. But I think by the time that you're done with this presentation, I'm going to teach you how to read a fund fact sheet and be able to pick out asset allocation and portfolio selection much better than you probably are doing right now. So let's get straight into it. In order to understand our money better, we first need to understand the system and the rules that we operate in. For example, you're playing a game of Monopoly. You can't use the rules of Scrabble to win at a game of Monopoly, right? So you have to understand the rules of the game first and foremost if you're going to win. So currently, our capitalistic system is only about 500 years old, slightly over 500 years old. Contrast that with the age of our universe. I mean, we're talking about 13.2 billion years since the Big Bang. So, you know, it's a short amount of time in the greater scheme of things. So if we take global GDP, which is used gross domestic product, which is a measure of economic output, you can see here that global GDP is around 94, give or take, $trillion, which is massive. I mean, it's absolutely massive. And if you look at South Africa, we are right here at 0.42 trillion. So we're not even 1% of global GDP. So in the greater scheme of things, I mean, the global opportunities are far larger than in South Africa, which is when we get to offshore investment discussions, we'll discuss this further. But this is something to bear in mind, that global opportunities and access to yield from those opportunities may be fairly limited if your portfolio is, you know, fully invested in South Africa. Some of the best fund managers always recommend at least a 30% offshore allocation. These days, probably even more. So let's have a look through it and we'll discuss it further. Okay, before we begin going through things in detail, it's important that I put this disclaimer out that everything that I discuss in this video is purely for information and entertainment purposes only. Nothing here is financial advice. Should you require financial advice, feel free to contact me and I'd be happy to schedule an appointment where we'd go through, you know, financial advice and I'd advise you holistically in detail. So let's have a look at the global markets, right? So right now, if we look at where we've come from 2006, I mean, the global markets, the global GDP was $47 trillion. You have the bond market that was sitting at $119 trillion. Something that is very, very underestimated is the derivatives market. And I'm going to show you the explosive growth that the derivatives market has had. So a derivatives market is usually contracts, options that are speculative in nature. So you sort of betting, is the price going to go up? Is the price going to come down? And you can see there, it's like more than 10 times the value of global output was utilized in global derivatives in 2006. Move that forward to 2021, 15 years later, the stock market doubled, 94 trillion US dollars. The bond market also went up by 221 trillion. The derivatives market has gone up anything between 1 to 4 quadrillion. Nobody's ever heard of that before. Quadrillion. So it's an absolutely huge number, and it's a game the institutional investors are playing. The man on the street, should he try and speculate, is going to absolutely get crushed, but it is something that's out there, right? What is difficult also to estimate is the property market in these figures, because 1.1 billion people on this planet exist without any form of identification. Sounds hard to believe, but it's pretty much true. So how do you operate a bank account? How do you own a piece of land? How do you do anything without proper identification? So it's hard to estimate those values, but that 1.1 billion people are generating economic value for themselves and their households. So yeah, there are things out there such as cryptocurrency projects. So there's a guy by the name of Charles Hoskinson developed a project called Cardano. Very interesting project if you understand it. And what he aims to do, particularly in Africa, is sort of unlock value here in this space. So this is something to keep an eye on, particularly over the next 5 to 10 years, because this could be potentially one of the big growth opportunities in Africa, right? So over time, we've just become obsessed with money. We've become obsessed with wealth. We've just become a society that's just lost its mind. And we don't look at what is behind it. Every day we hear of corruption scandals and this and that. But let's look back in history. Let's look back at the origins of money. So what is money? Money is just a unit of value. It's a transfer of value. We went to school, we learned about bartering and exchanging things. So money is just a transfer of value. And if you break it down to those, that is the fundamental cause of it, or the fundamental use of it. It's an exchange of value. So capitalism is really started in the 16th century, right? So Professor Niall Ferguson, highly recommend you read his book, The Ascent of Money. He says banks financed the Renaissance, bond markets decided wars, stock markets built empires, and monetary meltdowns made revolutions. So financial history is actually the backbone of human history, and not knowing these things can absolutely damage your wealth. So let's look at the four major asset classes. Let's look at the two that are designed for income or liquidity needs, and those are cash and bonds. And let's look at those that are designed more longer term, designed for capital growth rather than liquidity, and those are equities and property, right? So let's start off with cash. I give you a 100 Rand note. You give me whatever, bread, milk, a couple of sweets here and there. So what are we doing? We're exchanging value. My value in terms of my labor and effort that I put in, I'm remunerated, and then I exchange it for goods and services that I need or I want. So very big difference there. But why does this work? Well, it's a system that's just based on trust, right? So you trust that that banknote is going to be honored. It's all about trust. It's all about confidence, right? Now, in the days prior to paper, we can look at this little image here. So this is a clay tablet from Mesopotamia, right? 4 millennia ago. So what they would do was the bearer of grain on harvest day these clay tablets were given in advance, and the farmer who'd harvest the grain would pay it over in exchange for these clay tablets. So all that's changed now is that we're using cash instead of these clay tablets, which brings me to my next point. We're going to discuss crypto in a lot of detail, I think probably in another presentation, but I think it's something that I know a lot of people within my industry are very dismissive about and say, it's not going to happen, this, that, and the other. But if you look at the fundamentals, if you just look at the basic logic of moving from a clay tablet to a piece of printed paper, and you take now the money sitting in your banking app, which you don't see, you don't physically withdraw it in cash. What's the difference if that store of value is on a blockchain rather than in the banking system? Is there any difference? Absolutely not. So it boils back down to this trust and confidence. If there's trust and confidence in the system, and there's very good reason to believe that over the next sort of 5 to 8 years, I mean, some of the stats I'm seeing is it's the fastest adopted technology in human history. It's probably going to exceed 1 billion users by sort of 2028, maybe even more. So, for those wealth managers and wealth planners who are dismissive of crypto, I think you guys' eyes are seriously closed, and you need to get a broader perspective. Okay, so that's cash basically. Asset class, it's liquid, it's designed more for your short-term needs rather than long-term wealth creation. So one of the major issues right now that's making headlines all across the world is inflation. So what the hell is inflation? Where did it come from? What is the first known case of inflation, right? So we're going to start our story here, but with this little gentleman. He was what's known as a conquistador. His name was Francisco Pizarro, and he set sail from Spain to a place right here in Peru, right? So what he wanted to do was he wanted to find what was called El Dorado, the realm of the gold-covered king, right? So he set sail, he found the Incan Empire, and at that time, and this is why I say capitalist society is a 500-year-old thing, in that time, the Incan Empire had no need for precious metals. To them, labor was their unit of value, much like any communist society, right? So suddenly these Spanish guys hit the shore, they discover a mountain traveling from Peru to Bolivia called the Cerro Rico, which held roughly 2 billion ounces of silver and gold that was extracted over 250 years, helped by the locals, by the way, who had absolutely no idea why these Europeans were so into this shiny stuff that they were more than willing to help them. So this is where knowledge comes in also. So, I mean, they basically exploited these people who lacked the knowledge to understand the true value of what was there in their land, much like any colonization story. So South Africa is not unique in that respect in any way. So yeah, so that's what they did, and so over 250 years, all that gold and silver was shipped off back to Europe, right? So what was interesting was the more silver coins that was extracted and sent across to the Spanish Empire didn't actually make the Spanish Empire richer. All it did was it made prices higher, because you had an increased supply of money chasing the same quantity of goods. So, I mean, if we're talking sort of 1700s, I mean, that's your first recorded case of inflation, right? So what is that saying? If I'm a country, or if I'm one of these nations with the money printer on at the moment trying to solve my problems, I'm not really going to solve my problems, because the only way to solve my problems is to create more value, to create more goods, to invest in manufacturing, reduce unemployment. All those kind of things are going to really grow your economy in real terms, rather than putting a temporary band-aid over it and printing more money thinking you're going to solve the problems, because you're not. All you're doing is you're just making it worse for people who are in the middle class, and you're just sinking them back down. So that's something to consider. As a nation, we got to think about what we create and what we do. Okay. Thanks for watching, guys. Next time we look at the bond market. So comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you very much.